We fancy Teddy.
The eviction notice wasn't a piece of paper. It was a verdict. It was the final, deafening echo of a life that had collapsed around Ilara a decade ago. She stood in the doorway of her small, rented house, the official document trembling in her hand, its cold legal language a stark contrast to the hot tears carving paths through the dust on her cheeks. The walls of this house, though bare and worn, had been her sanctuary, the one thing she'd managed to hold onto after the world had taken everything else. Now it too was being ripped away. The weight of it all, the loneliness, the relentless work, the sheer exhaustion of just existing, crashed down upon her. Her knees buckled, and she slid to the floor, her back against the doorframe, a silent, shuddering sob escaping her lips. She was 47 years old, a black waitress with calloused hands and an empty savings account, and she had absolutely nothing to show for a lifetime of getting up. The eviction notice was the culmination of a grief that had begun 12 years earlier. Ilara's life had not always been this threadbare. Once it was filled with the laughter of her daughter, Maya, and the solid, reassuring presence of her husband, David. They were her anchor, her purpose. Then, a drunk driver on a rain-slicked highway had severed that anchor line, leaving her adrift in a sea of unimaginable pain. The year that followed was a blur of gray numbness, an existence where the only thing she felt was the profound, aching absence where her family used to be. She'd sold their home, unable to bear the memories whispering from every room. She took the cheapest rental she could find and found work at the hearth, a diner that promised warmth its food rarely delivered. She moved through her shifts like a ghost, refilling coffee cups with a smile that never reached her eyes, her soul still screaming in the silence. The other waitresses called her the quiet one, and left her to her grief. The first time she saw them, it was a Tuesday. 4 little girls, no older than 6 or 7, huddled together in a booth, their clothes too thin for the biting autumn chill. They were staring at a single menu with the intensity that spoke of more than just hunger. Ilara watched them from behind the counter, her server's intuition prickling. They were too young to be alone, too still, too serious. When she approached the oldest, a girl with fierce green eyes and a protective arm around the smallest, met her gaze without flinching. "We're just looking, thank you," she said, her voice too mature for her small frame, but Ilara saw the truth. She saw the hollow look in their eyes, a look she recognized from her own reflection. It was loss. Without a word, she turned and went back to the kitchen. She used her own meager tips to pay for 4 bowls of the day's stew and a basket of rolls. When she set the food down, the girls stared at it, then at her, with a mixture of shock and desperate hope. "It's on the house," Ilara said, her voice rough with disuse. "You eat up." That single act became a ritual. Every Tuesday and Thursday, the girls would appear. Ilara learned their names: Isabella, the fierce leader; Chloe, the dreamy artist; Sophia, the quiet bookworm; and Lily, the tiny, wide-eyed youngest. Slowly, over steaming bowls of soup and shared plates of fries, their story emerged. They were sisters, living in a group home a few blocks away. Their parents were gone, casualties of a factory fire. A dam broke inside Ilara. Her own loss, a vast and lonely ocean, suddenly found a shore in these 4 girls. Feeding them became her rebellion against the cruelty of the world. It was a small act, a defiant candle held against a vast darkness. She began setting aside portions, creatively miscounting orders, telling her boss the girls were her nieces. She'd bring them books, second-hand sweaters, and, most importantly, a safe, consistent hour of warmth and care. 10 years passed. The girls grew from scared children into resilient young women. Their Tuesday and Thursday visits the bedrock of their week. Ilara's life found a new purpose, a reason to keep the small house she could barely afford, because it was within walking distance of the diner and the home. She was their secret guardian, their steady rock. Then, one by one, they aged out of the system. Isabella left for a scholarship on the West Coast. Chloe followed her art to New York. Sophia won a full ride to a university studying literature. Little Lily, the last to leave, was adopted by a family in a neighboring state. Their departure left a new, different kind of silence in Ilara's life. The purpose that had sustained her was gone. The diner became just a job again, the house just a building. She was alone with her memories and the slow, grinding struggle of poverty. The eviction notice was the final proof that her quiet, secret mission of love had left her with nothing tangible. She had poured everything she had into those 4 girls, and now her own cup was utterly, completely empty. A week after the eviction notice, Ilara was packing her life into cardboard boxes, each one a monument to a dream she'd let go of. She was wrapped in a cocoon of resigned sadness. The kind of deep fatigue that promises this is simply how her story ends. The doorbell rang, a sound so foreign it made her jump. Nobody visited her. Wiping her hands on her apron, she opened the door. Parked at her curb, sleek and impossibly shiny against the cracked pavement, was a black SUV. Standing on her porch, their forms blocking the afternoon sun, were 4 women. For a heart-stopping second, she didn't recognize them. They were elegant, confident, radiating a success that felt alien on her humble street. Then the one with the fierce green eyes smiled, and a tear traced a path through her perfectly applied makeup. "Miss Ilara," Isabella whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Time folded in on itself. The little girls from the diner booth were here, on her porch, as women. Chloe, her hair still a wild cascade of curls. Sophia, holding a leather-bound journal. And Lily, no longer tiny but now taller than Ilara, her smile just as bright. They surged forward, enveloping her in a hug that smelled of perfume and hope, and a future she'd never dared to imagine for herself. They led her, stunned and speechless, back into her half-packed house, talking over each other in a joyful torrent. "We've been tracking you for months," Chloe exclaimed. "Isabella got her law degree," Sophia said softly. "She made it her mission to find you. We have something for you," Lily finished, beaming. Isabella took Ilara's work, roughened hands in her own smooth ones. "You fed us for 10 years, Miss Ilara. You gave us books, you gave us sweaters, but most of all, you gave us a piece of your heart. You made us feel worthy. You were our family when we had none." She placed a set of documents in Ilara's lap. Deeds, bank statements. Ilara's eyes, blurred with tears, struggled to comprehend. It was the paperwork for her house, paid in full and attached, a bank book with a balance that made her dizzy. "We bought it," Isabella said gently. "It's yours, forever, and this," she pointed to the balance, "is so you never have to wait another table unless you want to. This is so you can rest. This is so you can live." Ilara looked around at their faces, these women she had nourished with soup and love, and saw the living, breathing result of her life's work. They hadn't forgotten. Her love had not been poured into a void. It had been planted in fertile ground and had grown into a forest of strong, beautiful trees that had now circled back to shelter her. That night, they ordered a feast fit for a queen, but it was Ilara who fed them one last time, making her famous stew because they'd insisted. As they sat around her small table, now overflowing with food and laughter, Ilara felt the final, frozen shard of her old grief melt away. The loss of David and Maya would always be a part of her, a sacred scar, but it was no longer a wound that defined her. She saw now that her life had not been a tragedy followed by emptiness. It had been a love story, a story of a love so vast it had expanded to include 4 more daughters, a love that had now returned to her, multiplied. She had spent years believing she had nothing, measuring her worth by the emptiness of her bank account and the solitude of her home. But as she looked at the 4 incredible women she had helped to raise, she understood. Her true wealth had been growing, unseen, all along. The greatest legacy is not what we leave for people, but what we leave in them. And her legacy was love, and it was more than enough. Moral of the story: the seeds of kindness you sow in times of your own deepest sorrow often grow into the very forest that will one day provide you shelter. Your greatest impact is rarely measured in material possessions, but in the hearts you nurture and the lives you change with simple, consistent love.